Guide. Sticky jumping needs a guide. And not just any guide. A complete in-depth look into sticky jumping. Since no one else is going to do it, because barely anyone has gone through the effort of doing every single thing in sticky jumping, which ultimately means someone's got to do it at some point. And I'll be the one to do it. Because I've been through everything. Well, not everything, probably take away one thing, it's only a third less. But you get the idea. But before we do that, before we go into all the in-depth stuff, the hard stuff, the very complexities and difficult things, let's start with to start off the basics, let's start off with the most useful and most applicable type of jump. The basic sticky jump, or just a sticky jump, is usually the most useful and gains a lot of ground. Just by jumping and crouching, you get a lot of ground, and you can move a lot of distance just by doing it. As for the second one, and, well, not as applicable, but still useful depending on where you use it, there is a crouched. A crouched one is more about getting distance in a short span, not to go too high, because when you do this, you get a lot of height and distance, but sometimes you don't want the height and just a bit of the distance. This is usually for small areas where you can otherwise not move around as much, say that you're under here, you want to do a smaller jump, you go under. But if you did this, you go over, and you probably would slap this, depending on how you do it. Once you've practiced doing a basic sticky jump, the next step is to learn how to strafe. To go right, then to go left. Strafing is vital, and not to repeat myself on the same word, but it's just vital. It is very much the next principle of jumping. Strafing throughout the air gives you a ton of control. You have to hold A or D and move your mouse parallel to what you're doing. The next most important and useful type of jump is a pogo. A pogo is just a pogo. Quickly shoot one and another, chain together, 1, 2, over and over. Keep yourself on the ground and touching at the bottom of the floor, so that you don't get pretty much set back to where you're trying to do. You want to do a quick double, you need to shoot quicker, and then once it's lined up with 2, detonate. That's how you do a pogo. And if you want to do pogos a bit quicker or move around instead of holding WASD and basically sitting in one spot, and you want to move, you'll have to learn how to hold A and D and basically curve your momentum backwards, as in stopping yourself. Which is not to sound like a peasant intellectual, but that's just how it is. Shoot your stickies forward, hold S to stop your speed if you're going too quick. That's it. It's just a matter of practice and doing it. And what I'm doing here might be a bit advanced for some people, but with how many hours of experience I've had, it seems a lot easier than it does. As for the next basic type of sticky jump, there is the wall pogo. A wall pogo is just maybe just about going up, climbing up, and then basically ascending. This is the one that you'll probably be doing the most. It's one of the easiest and something that takes a bit of time to learn, but it's mostly just about detonating and then shooting immediately after, and whilst holding W throughout it. What I'm doing is the harder version of it, the one that has more control. The easier one is holding W and basically hugging the wall, shooting, detonating nearly immediately after, and so on. Now for the next one, we have going downwards. You have to hold, you can either just look sideways and hold the wall, which is really slow, very slow. You can do this, you can slowly back up and go backwards, and then as soon as you detonate, hold S. And descend, bit for bit, and repeat it over and over. Now, to do a double, it's the same as you would do with a pogo, is to shoot quicker and quicker and quicker and chain them together. There. Now, going right is about aiming to the right, whilst controlling yourself with A and D instead of W. And slightly curving your mouse a bit to the right. As we're going left, you need to shoot a bit upwards. Shooting left is, well, left here, it's like right, but it is. It's a bit janky. It's mostly about the angle, and you're probably not going to have a very good time doing this. It's pretty tough. You have to control with the D button instead of the A. Hold A, hold D. As for the next basic sticky jump, the double into pre-fire is what it is. It's a preemptive fire before you detonate this. Not to make it look hard or anything, or easy, but you shoot, detonate, and then detonate that. This is more about timing than anything, since you can't just detonate immediately as you fire, because that would just send you forward. Then you wouldn't get the knockback. So it's about timing. It's about the angle. You can go here and shoot upwards a bit. You can do a jump crouch, as you would, but the one that most people use is a crouched version.
Thanks, mate.
The other one, or not double but triple, is a very dangerous one. This can kill you instantly, if you don't do it correctly. But it gets you a lot of distance. It can go really far distances, but it doesn't get as much height depending on how you do it. It takes a bit of, practice. As for the next one, we'll talk about transfers, catches. As for what they are, a transfer is very simple to understand. It's about shooting, then going to the next area that you're going on. Well, going to where you're transferring the sticky. And then doing that. That is a transfer. As for a catch, this is what a catch is. Usually from a lot of knockback from something like this. And that's a catch. Usually the catch itself, if you're going really quick speeds and then stopping in one area. The next one is a bit more advanced. It's a bit harder than the others, but at the same time it's still a bit of a basic sticky jump. It's a kind of a 50-50 between a basic and advanced. It is a double pre-fire, essentially a sync, a double sync. Where you sync your stickies together to get a long distance or height, horizontally or vertically. It'll take a bit of time to get used to. But once you learn how to do it, well, with anything, it takes practice, it'll become second nature. The best way of putting it, you shoot up, and once you've shot upwards, you shoot downwards a bit. And that's a sync. Before we continue, I want to express something that is pretty important in jumping. And that would be your mouse sensitivity. Usually your mouse sensitivity will usually be at 4, well, by default or something in that range, and you'll want to lower it to something that is below 2, and usually in most circumstances, somewhere that is at 1 or in between 2. Usually, it really comes down to preference and the mouse pad size. If you don't have a big mouse pad, I would recommend going for something like 170 and above. If you have a bigger mouse pad, you should go for stuff like 120 through 1 or even below, because you need control. Control is everything in sticky jumping, and if you don't have control, you don't really have anything. You can't really shoot your stickies properly. Your mouse, if you flick too much, you'll basically be unable to shoot at the proper area, and you will fail the jump on whatever you are on. As for me, I go for 125 because it's the most comfortable for me. As from what you've seen, you can see that I don't have a, well, sticky bomb view model because I have it disabled, because of command R draw view model. And the reason being is because you can't see as much, meaning that you can't see where the stickies are going, meaning that otherwise, if this was in the way, I wouldn't know where to basically detonate. That is why I have it disabled. It's very useful to have it disabled. You get a lot more information and you get more of a general idea where it could be. And where to shoot too. It gives a lot of information because it covers a lot of your screen. Well, even if you have, you know, the minimal view models setting. But that doesn't matter. Also jump is to turn off motion blur because it's terrible. You should disable it. And that's all I have to say. Also, increase your field of view if you haven't already, because playing on 75, you're playing at a major disadvantage. It's not it's just pretty unnatural to play with 75. As you can see, you get less room of the area, and things become a lot more thin. As for the other settings, these ones you can't find normally, and you have to put them in the console, but they're related to the performance with the relation between your computer and the server you're connecting to. Stuff like interp and interp ratio, the rate at which you transfer data to the server, and so on. I don't know this in any technical sense, but all I know is that higher values for these usually are good. Some of them have to be on 0, and some just you don't really need to think about as much, but still, very important stuff. Rate and CO and CMD rate come down to the provider that you have, so you might want to just, you know, mix that around and see what is good, depending on what you have. Because I don't have an idea. And let me just explain to you why it isn't as hard as you think it is. The reason why Airpogo isn't as hard as you think it is because people use commands, things that you wouldn't normally use in Team Fortress 2 because they are disabled or they're related to the server that you're on. But due to that, most people have a divide between those who use it and those who don't. But then again, I don't really care, and I use them. So I'll tell you what they are before we can conduct how to do Airpogo. One of the commands is speedo or /speedo, something that tracks the amount of hammer units that you are travelling at, essentially the speed at which you're travelling at, and the other is third person. Third person just puts you into third person, and the reason why people use third person is because you can actually see your stickies from behind and the front, up, down, and so on. Whilst we're still on the subject about console commands, there are some console commands related to third person that change the angle, the position, of essentially how it looks when you use it. These commands are cam idealist, cam idealist lag, cam idealist up, and cam collision. Cam idealist is essentially a zoom in and zoom out button. The lower the value, the more it's zoomed in, and the higher the value, it'll be zoomed out. The value that I use is 160 because it gives the just enough. Because the normal value is only like a 10 difference. seconds. It's just enough. Cam Idealist lag? Well, Cam Ideal lag, not a clue, just set the value to 0, it'll help. Cam Idealist up, the normal value basically puts the crosshair, whilst you're in third person, way higher than it is. That is why most people put the value at -20, so that it is at the middle of your character. Sometimes it will be lower than it usually is with -20, because if you have third person on enabled before a server change or a map change, the camera will lower down basically, and then you have to change the value to 0. It doesn't happen a whole lot, but just in case. Cam collision basically gives collision to surfaces so that it prevents the camera from clipping. You'll probably want to disable this because it gets in the way of some of the jumps that you could probably do on some of the maps. Now let's discuss the values at which you can travel at. The horizontal speed of how you do a horizontal airpogo. This is incredibly important. Knowing the values at which you need to travel at and how to slow down is a very important component of Airpogo. Something that cannot be, well, I don't know. To put it into very simple terms, you're pretty much driving. You go too quick, you're going to smash into a wall. You go too slow, you're not going to go anywhere. You're just going to plummet and just fall. So you want to stay in a certain range most of the time, somewhere between 860 and 900. This is a very consistent limit, very good and doesn't really have any problems. It's very easy to do over and over, but anywhere above you have to try and do some mojo jojo. Say your value is at 940. If you're going to fall down, you can't just slow down immediately. You need to basically shoot first. You shoot and then you slow down. Downwards Airpogo and recoveries are the next type of Airpogo that you'll probably be doing after horizontal. These are actually very important. If anything, these are probably the most important next to horizontal Airpogo because of the fact that you can sink in downwards into recoveries. But we'll expand on that later, but let's talk about downwards first. Doing downwards Airpogo is very much similar to doing a horizontal Airpogo. You're usually pressing S in between after shots, before shots, to sync up your speed. The difference is that it's more of a constant. You will never get vertical speed. You will never essentially have more in between time, depending on how you do it. It's usually a 1, 2, wait, and then repeat, so on and so forth. Just like with aiming with horizontal Airpogo, the higher you aim in smaller dosages, the more you begin to go up and up, essentially changing the angle which you're going at. The same goes for downwards Airpogo. For every one you do, and the further you aim outwards, the more you'll be doing it at a different angle. I will explain this in a lettered, way than a speech, because it's very hard to explain. Recoveries, being the next part of a downwards Airpogo that you can extend into, is essentially getting out of a downwards Airpogo and transitioning into either a horizontal, diagonal, or vertical Airpogo. It really depends on how steep the angle or what the level's intention is behind the recovery, if it intends for it to be done. Recoveries are also much harder because of the fact that you have to constantly aim properly for each instance, but shoot constantly whilst maintaining your speed. To put it simply, you move upwards with your aiming, and then you basically have to curb your momentum back bit for every time you shoot. I know, it sounds a bit confusing, but as you can see in the video material here, it's just how it is. Verticals and diagonals. Probably the lowest skill floor thing to perform, but having the highest skill ceiling of any of the other type of Airpogo techniques. Scaling really, really high in the skill ceiling. Like compared to horizontal and downwards recoveries, any of it, it's incomparable. Firstly, let's talk about doing a basic vertical. Basic verticals are essentially aiming upwards and then pressing WASD to control yourself. Essentially not really moving, it's very simple. And to start a simple vertical Airpogo, simply you do a crouch jump into uncrouched. As for the difference between doing a crouched and uncrouched vertical Airpogo, we'll start with the uncrouched ones because they are the simplest and the ones that you should learn firstly. They are more consistent and they will come more handy later on when doing some of the harder maps. Uncrouched verticals are usually very quick in how they're done. It's usually constantly shooting M1 and then probably nearly immediately detonating afterwards. But it's not immediate, just very close to immediate. You'll get to understand it once you put enough practice into it. It's not really explainable. It's something that only through practice can you understand where I'm coming from. Crouched vertical Airpogo is actually a lot more simpler and actually can be calculated by using a command known as CL show position, which will appear on the top right of your screen. If you do a double pre on the ground to send yourself flying, usually the value will be over 2000. So you'll want to look at that and wait for the value to go between 1100 and 1000. Once it's between that value, you can do a double in the air and then repeat that over and over and over to basically keep it consistently. Now about diagonals. Diagonals are essentially the opposite end of a recovery. Recoveries usually require you to constantly press S and there to maintain the speed. So just take that one part and only that part, and all you need to do is essentially aim. But you have to always maintain your speed by constantly pressing S over and over and over again. Diagonal's additional difficulty to doing it and executing it is understanding how to incorporate both uncrouched and crouched in a way to support each other. To basically put it, and I repeat this word a lot, is knowing when to press crouch and not to press crouch. This changes everything. If you hold crouch at a bad time, you're going to basically go way too quick and you're probably not going to be able to line up another shot. But sometimes if you use an uncrouch, you won't be able to sink in another because of the amount of downwards momentum that you have going downwards. I'll express it in letters. Now, what comes next after the Airpogo? What could be next? Well, it's something that goes like... Hardpogo, from its name, is an extension of Pogo in difficulty. And with the extension of, well, it being a extension of Pogo, comes the fact that it has a lot of techniques behind it. Usually from the creation of other people's, well, mental capability and their ability to make things of extensions. And by no means is it easy. I can't even explain it properly. It's just so hard to explain it. Hardpogo, hard to explain. Where to begin on what techniques Hardpogo has comes with how much it's done. Hardpogo has techniques where they're only used in like a couple maps, literally a couple. Some even in one, some in multiple, and some in many of them. These techniques can range far and wide in how they're done, so I'll explain to you, lettered or in speech. Holes. Holes, just the most versatile of all the type of techniques. They vary a lot from each other, and each have their own type of variation, depending on how they're made. Holes are just one of the most limitless types of Hardpogo. They come in much and any size. They don't really have any restrictions as how they can be done. You can make squares, triangles, like anything. It just needs to be a hole that you can fit through. Sometimes you can climb up holes and then go down, maybe horizontally. Most of the time you're mostly going to go down into holes, not up or horizontally. Horizontal ones are either easy as hell or really hard. The hardest of the hole techniques would be the hole climb. Essentially climbing into a hole. Not like, you can't go just straight up, but you have to basically distance yourself and slowly build yourself up at a certain angle, essentially away from the wall, whilst climbing. It is by no means easy. As for how tight holes can be, well, as you can see, this is a near perfect hole. Well, good luck if you ever try this. 180s, or, well, just 180s, that's the name of it, are essentially when you do a one side to the other side, and that's pretty much it, usually with a catch. Performing a 180 is essentially doing a double, strafing away from the wall that you are trying to double from, then strafing back in whilst trying to simultaneously aim for another double, a catch. Corners. Corners are misunderstood by some people. Usually, what people think they're supposed to do is do a 180 and curve all the way around to the other side. But in reality, what you do is, you essentially shoot one sticky, then strafe for that sticky whilst shooting the second on the same wall, hug the corner at which you're going, well, what you're currently on, and then as you fall down, you detonate the sticky that you shot on the side at which you came from, and then you shoot on the side that you're about to go to. There is also one special corner that is only in one place on one map, which is a slanted corner. It's essentially the same procedure of what I've already told. Essentially, shoot one and then shoot while strafing out with that, and with the second ready to basically detonate, and then you can strafe to the other side. This one is a more powerful version that asks you for that to a near perfect, not perfect degree, but in a much harder scale. Next is High Telepogo. It's where the ground is faceable for your stickies, but not you. This is where you'll need to detonate faster, pretty much for every instance of your sticky shots, and to do your jump, well, pogo-wise. It's not done in many areas, and it's something that a lot of people hate. Pillars. Pillars are like 180s, except you're going down under instead of over, usually curving your momentum in the same sense as that, but in a much tighter way instead of a free-form way. As to why pillars and pogo slides are similar in nature, it comes from the fact that a pogo slide has it predetermined for you to do already. You're pretty much usually hugging a wall and then shooting downwards whilst trying to aim as much as you can to get to the other side. As for the difference between pillars and pogo slides, pillars is usually about positioning yourself and then curving your momentum under to get to the other side, whilst a pogo slide is essentially trying to fit through and get a bit of the knockback and try and stick in the other side. The former is harder than the latter, but for the other pogo slide techniques, these vary entirely from each other. Firstly, for the first practical pogo slide that you'll see in some of the maps, it is a upwards walled pogo slide, where you use the first knockback of your first sticky to get into the front of the second one, bonk the ceiling, and then use the knockback from the second one and shoot as quick as possible onto the wall to catch. The next pogo slide is a grounded pogo slide, something that there's a bit of confusion about. Some people don't understand how it works, but the most practical way is to use a first sticky shot in a very close proximity of a second, where you strafe forward into the second one, shoot another that's a bit forward, and try and essentially stop yourself and detonate. It sounds a bit hard. Slopes. Slopes are basically slopes. They are pretty much just sloped surfaces. The reason behind the difficulty is the interaction with stickies behind them, depending on how high the slope is. The higher the slope, the less you can get from behind, as in the lower you are firing from, essentially the lower angle of the slope, the harder it is to do it. Going down slopes is pretty difficult. It involves strafing every instance of detonation onto the other one. If you do not strafe correctly, you will not be able to get under the sticky and repeat this pattern. And just as it is, you will fail if not done. Climbing a slope is probably just as hard as going down. It's mostly about trying to not hit the surface, trying to curve upwards bit for bit as you climb up. It's harsh because, well, if you do not correctly position yourself, which I've said before, you will fail, and because stickies, how they interact with slopes, the explosion, or essentially the AoE of it, does not curve circular. It curves more in boxes than it does in rounded ways. Tight Pogo. Tight Pogo is more or less multiple techniques from Hardpogo, essentially already existing techniques, put together, but put into very tight spaces where you then have to perform different procedures in order to do it, usually with abstract types of aim, uncrouch, and so on. Tight Pogo can't really be explained and defined. It is, by its raw nature, just tight. Very tight, very, small. Some of the stuff does take a bit of a different approach, where you have to shoot, say, in very large amounts forward than you would in smaller dosages because of how tight it is. Player clip. Player clip is what you think it is. It's the clipping of the player being able to go into a surface, except stickies can. It's like high telly pogo, except it isn't. It's essentially the wall version of it. And ceiling, potentially, but that's never been done before. Player clip's difficulty comes from the fact that it requires a lot of hugging and the management of, well, your W key. That and the fact that you have to use momentum in such a weird way that it makes it into a completely abstract means of what a wall pogo usually is. The hardest part of probably player clip is going down in a player clip. Going downwards involves strafing each and every instance for every time you shoot downwards. And this is repeating. There's no other, talkative way I could put it, but this is just ultimately what it is. Phase Pogo. Phase Pogo is more of the theory behind it than it is about understanding it. Understanding the theory is essentially understanding it as it is. Not to make it complicated, and I am overcomplicating it probably, but phase is mostly about the horizontal momentum over the vertical momentum in order to drop through certain surfaces. It really depends on the procedure of what it wants you to do. Uncrouched sticky jumps, and telly surfaces. The reason why I put these together is because the relation between each other is a good combination. By using the telly surfaces to be low enough, it makes it so that you can't use crouched, which means you'll have to use uncrouched. And that's the difficulty behind uncrouched and telly surfaces. They work well together. The difficulty behind telly surfaces is more or less the fact that you have to balance yourself at a distance constantly. You can never hug the wall, and you've always got this fixation in the mind, this mindset of if you touch the wall whatsoever, you're going straight to the back, meaning that you have to position yourself very well at all times whilst trying to strafe so that you don't touch the wall. Can't explain it, but it's the best way I can put it. Letter strafes. Letter strafes are basically a double with a precise strafe
into catch on the next letter that you're trying to go to. There is not much else of an explanation, but it's a bit vital in knowing because there isn't much material of it.
Slants. Slants are probably the hardest Hardpogo technique there is. The hardest means of it comes from going down, descending a slant. Going up a slant is very simple, but going down one, it's a completely different world. Slants have the same relation to play clip in the sense that you need to strafe with the W key into the wall. That, and the fact that going at a certain angle, say that you're aiming from the right and not just the left, makes it a much harder procedure because, as you know, the female shoots from the right side depending on which way it faces. You can change it to the left, but nobody really does that, so yeah. The hardest interpretation of slants is the cone. The cone slant is the hardest in the game, requiring tons of strafing, really precise aim, since you're trying to aim down and go essentially down to the bottom, and you have to go from right to left all the time. And once you get to the bottom, it's even harder, because if you like aim just wrong by a bit, you're gonna fail. And here we have the sideways slant, probably the actual hardest one. I exaggerated my words a bit about the cone, but this is a completely different beast. It requires precise aim, constant movement, and if you do not strafe correctly whilst aiming, like you have to put both together in a really, good manner, you're done for. Better yet, it gets worse once you get, like after you get through the hole, and then you catch on the other side after doing a procedure of shots onto the other side. It gets worse, because then you have to aim at the right side, and aiming at the right side with a slant is hell. It is very, very hard. Not easy at all. Not at all. Teleport Pogo. Teleport Pogo is shooting stickies ahead of a teleport that will place you, well, at a different spot. You place the sticky at the certain spot that it would want you to place it, and then once you have teleported, you detonate. Teleport Pogo is only used in 2 instances. The one you're currently watching is the unnerfed version. It's a carbon copy of the one that does it, but it's just unnerfed, and it doesn't, take you to the next level, say you get to the midway point. As for the reason why they nerfed it, I haven't got a clue. It's probably because during that time, most people were just scared of such foreign concepts, but people have gotten better, and people understand how to do these things a lot better than they previously did. W-strafe. W-strafes, despite what I've told you, well, before, not to use W-strafes, but in this circumstance, W-strafes are useful, but they're only useful in a very few handful of situations. So few, in fact, that you're probably never going to really use it unless you go to the degree. The primary usage behind a W-strafe is aim over the strafe, as in you're both strafing with the higher importance going to the aim, because of, say, you want to catch, but if you were to do a normal strafe and try and, aim at the same time, it would kill your momentum. That is why W-strafe fills in that blank. 64 unit player clip. As for the reason why I would choose this instead of putting it together with, well, player clip, is because it is a special kind of player clip. It's where you, when descending, have to use nothing but doubles, but when you're ascending, you can just, single it every single time. But the special part is what I've said from the, well, former. You have to double your way down. That's what makes it special.
Hard catches and pre-fires. Since Pogo is an extension, or Hardpogo is an extension of Pogo, so comes the fact that it's going to have extensions of catches, transfers, and pre-fires. Things like pre-firing from doubles, doing doubles, and then catching on really tight surfaces instead of there having a lot of area where you can just shoot in the general direction. And long distance transfers, where you'll probably be using singulars and then transferring to a much longer distance than you think you would normally do.
Oh, no, not the bees! Not the bees! Ah!
Agitated hornets aside, and bees. You've probably seen a couple of the bugs before watching this and thought to yourself, how?
Riot is trying to get banned from ETF well at the moment. That's a thick edge bug. He does it! He gets Lao! Oh my goodness!
Yeah, I mean, great.
What you saw there was a wall bug. Not an edge bug, but a wall bug.
To do a wall bug, you'll have to find a angled wall, and once you've found an angled wall, you need to do a explosive jump, or just a jump. Usually doing explosive jumps makes it easier. Then tapping left and right whilst holding W whilst facing the angled wall. Once you have successfully wall bugged, you will go into a state of being clinged or being bugged, where you can now basically let go of W and then repress W to re-cling. The reason why this works is because your bounding box, which is the collision box which gives you interaction to, well, surfaces, anything related to surfaces, going up, so on, so that it stops you. Why it works is the interaction between the corner of your bounding box and a sloped surface giving only interaction to the corner. Since a flat surface, well, gets the whole bounding box, the flat surface of it, instead of just the, well, corner of your bounding box. Edge bugs.
Edge bugs is where the game confuses you in thinking that you have touched the surface, but you actually haven't. As in, your momentum is not killed once you hit an edge bug. Pretty much all the vertical momentum, like going downwards for an edge bug, is pretty much killed, and all the horizontal momentum is kept. As for the difficulty behind edge bugs, there are automatic edge bugs, and then there are edge bugs that require a right amount of momentum to do, strafing, and so on. Bounces and jump bugs. These bugs are related to the interaction between a telesurface and you jumping just as you were about to touch it. These are related to the servotics and how they handle you, the player. Jog bugs and bounces are performed by doing a procedure at the start of a jump. These can range from a walk-off, where you could just walk off the edge, jumping off the edge, performing a C-tap off on the edge, or bonking the ceiling. And this can range differently. Not all ceilings are the same. The difference between a bounce and a jump bug is bouncing requires you to just hit the jump button just as you're about to hit the floor. But a jump bug requires a uncrouch jump at the same tick. Basically, it's frame perfect to put it. There is another type of bounce, which is the random bounce. The random bounce is, well, random. It's just random. You have to just get lucky.
literally you're supposed to get lucky in the knockback that you get from a projectile, say a sticky bomb or a grenade launcher. Slam bugs. Slam bugs are not very applicable with sticky jumping. It's more of a case for a soldier. This will happen to you eventually. Say you've progressed enough in your skill level to perform slam pogo. But in this circumstance, slam bugs happen at random for demo man, sticky jumpers. So I just wanted to mention this beforehand. Doing it consistently, I don't know. I just have had the experience of having it randomly happen to me. Texture bugs is in the same sense of a wall bug, but how it's performed is where you strafe to the other side of where you were strafing, essentially when you enter into a new texture brush.
Head bug. Head bugs are incredibly simple, slightly misunderstood by some, but simply uncrouching after you've done a crouched jump or sticky jump, and then upon hitting the surface, like the ceiling, crouching immediately in order to do a head bug.
Hey buddy, I think you got the wrong door. The leather club's 2 blocks down.
Fuck you.
Niche, useless in most circumstances, and only applicable in very few. These are niche techniques. Starting with grenade sinks, since they are pretty useful in some circumstances compared to ones that could otherwise be lethal, like say triple pre's into a catch.
Grenade sinks fill in that purpose by giving you the ability to sink in a grenade and a sticky at the near same time.
Grenade sinks are used in bonuses or at the start of a map run in most circumstances. Other than that, they're otherwise not really used at all. Sticky overloading is overloading the sticky bomb launcher's maximum capacity, 8, and using the first sticky that you shot as the basis to get to a other part that you would otherwise not be able to do normally. Next is sticky ticks. There are 3 types of, tick stickies. There are quads, quints, and with only one instance of this ever being done, a sextuple tick. The main usage behind tick stickies is for bonuses to get an intense amount of, momentum from an explosion at pretty much the same place without you killing yourself. First, let's go over quad stickies, the simplest of the kind.
Quads are very simple. It is mostly just about timing the 4th shot with a triple pre without killing yourself with the detonation.
Quints. Quints are a bit more tricky, as in you're now combining overloading with a timed 4th shot with a triple pre. It's a bit confusing, but it's a less view.
And lastly, we have limited regen.
Limited regen is, well, limitation of the regeneration of your ammo refill. The clip, as in it no longer refills, which means you have to shoot at, well, really, well, just weird angles, and you have to go really fast, or else the clip is going to run out and, well, you can't shoot anymore. Game over. Limited regen is also not done very much because not a lot of people enjoy it, plus the fact that it's never used in most circumstances other than the niche of when it is. It's just about going quick. That's all it is, really. Want to see something that is complete and utter fucking garbage? Something that is so diabolically fucking cancerous, gay, and simultaneously the worst thing to ever exist?
You're bored, don't we have the cancerous thing?
It is just the worst.
Dredge 2 is the worst thing to ever be created in jumping history. No one wants to do it, no one likes it. Why it's even in the game is beyond me. I don't know.
A map that is filled with nothing but gimmicks, none of them that are good. Like, none of them are good. That's the problem with it. None of it's fun. It's absolutely ball-bustingly painful, and for no good reason. It's not fun.
Why it's in the game, and I had the pleasure, and by pleasure I mean the pleasure of fucking my bloody goddamn balls getting bursted, like, in different dimensions. Having to fucking beat the damn thing. No one's done it. It's just, what, like two people, me and, you know, the Rat King, because, you know, the Rat King knows how to do ratinous rat stuff, because he's the ratinous ratter of the ratinous Rat King named fucking Rats. Fucking Rat Man. Hell, one of the fucking gimmicks in the bloody map doesn't even work correctly. That's just how bad it is. Something it's set up to give you a gimmick, and it doesn't even work properly. Why? Why? The reason probably as to why it was added is because, haha, funny Demo Man map with gimmick Airpogo and gimmick Pogo that is very annoying to do because we have rat people who love to grind hard maps. No they don't. No one wants to do it. How do you know something about rat people? They don't do stuff like this. There are insane people like me who have nothing better to do. Just to bloody fucking, you know, pogo all day and just grind maps. And I get this, the displeasurable experience of Dredge 2. The worst thing in the game. And am I going to teach you how this thing, you know, exceeds the gayness that it has? No. I don't want you to play this. And it doesn't deserve any of the recognition that it you know, has. All it needs is distaste, disdain, and anything else in those terms. I don't like this map. This map sucks. Oh yeah, and finally, before we end this, fuck you, whoever to make this map. Fuck your gimmicks. Fuck everything in relation to Dredge 2. Fuck this map. Just fuck it in general. You can drench your asshole with gimmick shit, shoving a big ass gimmicky dildos up your ass because you're pretty much the gayest person to ever create the most gayest map in the world, and so on and so forth. Remove Drenched, and goodbye. I hope nothing like this ever gets created again. Fuck you. Maps and tiering is the basis of what is the hardest jump in the map. You can have very easy jumps, like completely every single one of them, but if one of them is, say, a tier 5, then the map is a tier 5 by default, regardless. That is how the tiering works in jumping. As for which tiers represent what difficulty, There is very easy, where basically it's just mostly about learning how to strafe, how to do normal sticky jumps, basically all the basic shit. Tier 2 is where you might have to do something like a pogo, wall pogo, something like that, in a very easy way. Tier 3s is when you have to do harder things, maybe like an air catch, a pre-fire with an air catch, like harder stuff. Tier 4 can incorporate some hard pogo techniques, and then you'll start doing a bit of small air pogos, like say triple air pogos in the sky. Tier 5s will begin to start to ask you for longer air pogos, maybe downwards, sometimes a bit more diagonal verticals, and it will incorporate some of the harder hard pogo techniques. And then we have Tier 6s. Tier 6s is where it basically asks you for some of the hardest stuff to do, like really long air pogos. It's some of the hardest of the hard pogo techniques, because Tier 6 is not technically Tier 6. There are Tiers 6 through 10, the unofficial official, and there is the official unofficial Tier 11 and above, which hasn't been discussed yet. It's still a bit kind of like in the air about what it is, and if it even is. Now for the maps, I will be picking from my personal choice. I do not know what is popular and what is, cool with everybody. Like, I honestly don't know. I'm picking from my personal tastes, even if they're, not popular. I may miss out on a few really cool maps, and I'm probably picking the worst apples, probably the sourest, potentially, and some ripe ones. So, if you already are a jumper, or, some of the top ones, I'm not sorry. This is just how it is.
Starting with Tier 1s, we have Rush and Nova. And that's it. These are the only good maps for Demo Man Tier 1. There are no others, unfortunately.
Next up we have Tier 2s, starting with Haze,
Lithium, Amazon.
slightly underwhelming. Moving on to Tier 3, Sketchy Final,
Autumn, Minor, Speed, Ice, version 4, Demolition, TX Final. I probably missed out on a notable few in Tier 3s, but other than that, moving on to Tier 4s.
ASDF, Koi, Lanik, Titan, Providence, Zero version 2, Stress Final,
Anando, Air, Spy 101. Some of the notable Tier 4s, but other than that, let's move on to the next tier, 5. Striker Bolt, Depression, Homie Beta, Glassy Dev RC3, Georgia Lager Redo, Vertigo, Oreo Topless, Sonny, Armature, Argula, Just Roll, MBN B for B.
Now, we're moving on to Tier 6. Tier 6 and tiers above, it's mostly
Opinionated, since there are no official rankings for maps other than them being Tier 6, quote unquote.
So I'm just going to take everything at face value and just put them from what I think is their proper ranking in terms of tiering. Other than that, I'm probably going to be wrong between tiers 7 through 9, but tiers 10 and probably 6 I will probably be, but don't take it for granted.
Deity X Wheezy, Rat, Scorpion, Moist, Hardware, Horus Final 2, Jasmine, Rover B1, What? Over Beta, Rutabaga, Anxiety,
Storm, Bane, Frost, Heck, Miura, Super version 5, Schadenfreude,
Happy Gonk, Carrot, Mariel, If, Vanished, Horus,
Yumpy, Fraud,
Mariel 2, Starkey, Silent, Underscore, Brotactinium, 6, Mariel 3, Psycho Zip, When, Jabroni, Virtuoso, Virtuosic. Tier 11s contain, well, no maps. The only tier 11 map would technically be When, B2, as in its unnerfed state, but it isn't. So these are reserved for bonuses, and pretty much only bonuses. Nova Bonus 4. Revenant Bonus 6. Virtuosic Bonus 4. And for tier 12, there is one map and one map alone. Its name is just simply The, and it is the hardest map in existence as of right now. And if you read the title, this is what it's about. The 100%.
You're doing... Oh, yes! And the way to do it! You're doing good, lad!